It wasn't long ago that I noticed a strange noise coming from the air conditioning unit in the wall of the living room. At first it was almost imperceptible from the other noises such a device would typically make. It started out as a slight clanking sound, only when it was first turned on. I had just accredited it to the age of the apartments and the appliances there within. Realistically, they weren't all that old in the grand scheme of things, but without constant upkeep, things tend to break down and fall apart relatively fast. Everything in the place made at least some kind of noise, though. The washing machine shook, the dishwasher sounded like a jet taking off, and the fridge would kick on every few minutes and hum so loudly that I'd have to turn on the television to hear anything over it. So you can see how it wasn't such a big deal for the air conditioner to rattle a little. I put it to the back of my mind as just something that comes with age. That wasn't until it started making it more and more often. I first noticed it when I turned it on, and the rattling didn't just go away after a second or two. I'd better tell the landlord so maintenance can come fix this, I thought. After about a minute, it once again stopped, and the thought faded into memory. A few weeks passed, and I began to notice other strange occurrences. Scratching in the walls, the electricity flickering in and out, the occasional thump in the night. Again, things that could all happen due to the age of the wiring. Maybe a mouse had gotten into the walls, or a noisy new neighbor had moved in. All pretty explainable, I thought. Besides, I worked a lot and really didn't have a lot of time to do much, so it didn't bother me. But when things started to go missing in my tiny, one-bedroom apartment, I started to worry. I hadn't been home in what felt like a couple of weeks. Between work and friends, I was barely there at all besides to sleep and bathe. I figured that I should do a thorough search of the place and see where my things could have gone. The TV remote, a calculator, several pairs of socks, and one shoe were apparently misplaced. So I went through room to room, which was really only 4 rooms, searching high and low to find my things, and as I did this, I noticed more and more small, ineffectual things were also missing. Strange, I thought. Where could these things have gone? I hit the power button on the TV and sat down in my familiar armchair, now a stranger in my own forgotten home, and noticed something. The TV wasn't on. I flipped the light switch up and down, but nothing. Well, for God's sake, this is getting a little ridiculous. I got up and twisted the knob on the stereo. Nothing. I went around and tested all the appliances to see if they were all still functioning. To no avail, as not a thing in the place was still functioning except, strangely enough, the increasingly loud air conditioner. It came on with a loud rattle and ran that way for several minutes until it sparked. I heard a loud pop, and then it too died. Maybe the power's out and it'll be fine in the morning, I thought half-heartedly. I had a hard time sleeping that night. The neighbors were especially loud, and the being without power made me a bit nervous. I woke up the next morning to find that the power was still out. I took a shower, got dressed, and went over to my neighbors to ask if they were having similar problems. I knocked loudly several times, but no answer. I decided enough was enough, and went to the maintenance office to complain, and hopefully resolve the issue. When I opened the door, the smell of stale smoke swept into my nostrils. The place was a mess. Papers and ashes all over the desk, peeling paint, smudges on the windows, and a TV with only static bolted to the wall. Sitting behind the desk was a thin, graying man who looked as if he hadn't bathed in a week. I told him about how everything was suddenly not working but the AC unit until it sputtered its last. He gave me a sarcastic look, and with a gruff he grabbed his toolbox and followed me back to my apartment. You see, I would have called, but for some reason nothing seems to be working, and I don't think the electricity is out because the air conditioner was running, and suddenly stopped. Well, let's take a look at it, he said. He went over to it and unscrewed the faceplate and peered inside. He clicked his flashlight on and went to work unscrewing and checking different things, when he stopped suddenly. and pulled out a tiny thing attached to a cord that didn't look like it belonged. He looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "This yours?" I couldn't even identify what he was holding. "I don't believe so. What is it?" "One of those little spy cameras. You haven't been having girls over secretly taping them, have you?" he said with a sly grin. "No! What the hell was that doing in here?" I was getting a little scared at this point, and a little irate at the man's comment. He shrugged. "Well, let's see where this wire goes then, huh?" He followed the wire with his hand, and stopped to look inside. "There's a little hole in here. It goes into the wall." He pulled out his hammer and got to work taking chunks out of the drywall and following the cord. I was freaking out at this point. Who put that there? Was this dirty old man watching me? Are there more of them? All these things and more went through my head as I watched him work. "Well, that explains a lot," he said under his breath. "What? What is it?" I exclaimed. "Well, it looks like somebody's rewired your outlets over here." He backed away to show me what he was seeing. "But why?" "My guess? Stealing your power. You sure you didn't notice anything?" His calmness put me on edge. I thought back to the odd noises in my walls, the thumping, the flickering lights. What had once seemed such a normal thing now had my heart racing in my chest. I noticed a few things here and there, but I haven't been here a lot lately, so I thought it was just an old place. He gave me a skeptical look and continued following the ever-expanding bunch of wires and cables throughout the place. Some wires would branch off to more tiny cameras, hidden in vents and just in the shadows. One even wired into the eye of one of my pictures. How have I not noticed these? My heart had started beating faster and faster as he discovered more and more cameras. He kept going, one by one, and found all of my electricity had been rewired into one central bunch that led to the bedroom. My heart stopped. How long have these been here? Not long, I'd say. We check all the appliances and outlets before we rent the places out. Well, where does it all lead? He kept knocking holes in the wall with his hammer and following the dreaded cables until finally he stopped and looked into the most recent hole that he had made with a flashlight. The space between the walls gets a lot bigger here. I think I can fit in there. I see something glowing just around the corner. He smashed a hole big enough for him to squeeze through and disappeared into my bedroom wall. He appeared a few seconds later with a grim look on his face and his skin pale. He was no longer the calm, apparently fearless man that he was before. You aren't gonna want to hear this, but, there's a little room back there. Bunch of monitors set up all over and all sorts of shit scattered around. Looks like, somebody was living in there, but no sign of him now. He swallowed hard. This place is starting to freak me the hell out. If I were you, I'd leave. I packed my things, as he said, and left for my mom's that day, not wanting to spend another second in that place. Over the next few hours, the police came and investigated the whole scene. They found 20 different monitors, all linked up to VHS players in that little room between the walls. Surprisingly, though, no tapes were ever found, and neither was the thing that had been watching me for all those nights. A few weeks had passed, and, a box arrived on my mother's doorstep. It was unlabeled. But inside, I found all the little things that had gone missing in my apartment over the last few weeks. I also found a dirty, ripped piece of paper with a barely legible message scrawled on it. I like your new place much better. There is a saying, a quote whose origin has been lost, eroded into dust by time, reformed, and passed down through the ages to be bastardized for modern listeners. Everyone wears a mask. You see, it's far truer than most people think. I know better than anyone else in the world, though I know that what I can see and the saying have only a skin-deep connection. And as I sit here watching the silvery needles of rain stab the gray concrete and listening to the faint hum of the dim electric lights overhead, I wonder how long I have left. I know that I have alerted the authorities to my activities, and I know that they won't let me leave here alive. Not when I could plant the seeds of doubt in the heads of the people who have lived under their secret rule. It's useless to write or record anything. They'd find all records and destroy them. Eons of shadowy dealings have made them very cautious when it comes to any information about their existence. They'll be here soon, I can feel it, but I don't know the exact moment, and I don't know what face they'll be wearing. But they will be here. And this dingy little diner, with its bacon grease stink and cracked vinyl seats, will be where I make my final stand. The knowledge of my imminent death angers me more than it frightens me. I had been so careful, so utterly meticulous in how I disposed of the bodies, and destroyed all evidence of my involvement. I was fast, almost mechanical in my efficiency, my knives parting their false skin and spilling their blood on road. I made a dent in their ranks, but they've been here since before humanity learned to be afraid of the dark, breeding in the shadows like bacteria, and infiltrating all aspects of society. I remember when I first saw one. I was only 20. My life had lost purpose, and I was a few weeks away from ending it all, when I saw the president's speech live on the air. I saw the things that stood behind him, watching him spew meaningless rhetoric with their lidless, flower-like eyes, and smiling with their anglerfish teeth, as if they knew a joke that no one else was privy to. They were dressed like the president's personal escorts. I was horrified, to say the least, and I wondered if my mind was playing tricks on me. But my mind was empty of all imagination back then. I didn't have the mental capacity for such hallucinations, and on some subconscious level, I knew that. Of course, I still tried to explain away what I had seen, telling myself that I was overworked, and that the stress was playing havoc with my mind. But then, one night, when I was out walking, letting the chill October air numb my senses and wondering if a noose or a bullet was the better option, I saw a man in a ratty, filth-encrusted hoodie watching me from the other side of the street. I lived in a nice cookie-cutter suburban spawn at the time, and the sight of someone looking so out of place made me uneasy, to say the least. The man was an intruder in this peaceful neighborhood, like a spider in the flower garden, and I instantly felt the hair on the back of my neck stand to full attention. I tried to ignore him, but I could feel his gaze in me, and I knew that he was following behind me, though he was silent in doing so. The man kept up with me for several blocks, always getting closer with each step I took. I chanced to look back and felt my blood go cold when the rays of the fading sunlight illuminated the writhing, blackened tendrils that squirmed under the hood and caught the gleam of rows of thin, jagged teeth. The fear rose in my stomach like bile, making me choke and gag. The man was getting closer, and the low, chilly breeze caught his rancid stink and blew it to me. He smelled like low tide and rotted vegetation. I broke into a run just as I felt the stench grow stronger, alerting me to the fact that he was only a few inches away from me. I ran until my lungs burned and I couldn't breathe anymore, but the stink stayed in the air, and not even the rain that came later could wash it away. I saw them more and more after that, loitering on street corners with cigarettes clamped between their thorn-like teeth, staring back at me from the counter of my local pharmaceutical store, contracting the moist petals that enclosed their eyes like a perverse wink, and smiling hungrily out at me from behind car windows. I was getting hemmed in, and I knew it. They knew that I was aware of their true faces, and they were letting their masks drop to show me what they knew. And that the hunt was on. I stopped taking my antidepressants. I couldn't go back to the pharmacy, not when one of them could easily poison my pills. I started to leave the house less and less, fearing that one of them would be waiting for me in some darkened alley, but I also grew to dread the confines of my own home, knowing that one night I might wake to see a shadowy figure standing over my bed with a knife in its hand. The remainder of my pills left my system, and I fell into a depression that was deeper than anything that I had ever experienced. I wanted to kill myself to escape from the nightmare that my life had become, but something stopped me. An emotion that I hadn't felt strongly in a very, very long time. Not since I found out that my mother had a tumor in her brain, and spent my every waking minute ranting and screaming at the injustice of it all as she wept and tried to escape creatures that only she could see. Anger. White, hot anger flared up in my gut, and I felt myself drawing away from the noose and the bullet as my anger directed all my attention toward the flower-eyed beasts that stalked me. How dare they threaten me? They had obviously been around for a long time, and there were almost definitely more of them in other countries. They had been running all forms of government and entertainment for ages, feeding off of people and killing anyone who found out about them. There had been others like me, that I was sure of. They all looked at me with such excitement. It was obvious that they had done this sort of thing before, and in all other cases, I bet the people that they hunted gave up and let them win, but that was wrong, and I was not going to roll over and let them stick the knife in. I would fight back. Let them know that I was not like the other cowards, who couldn't bear the truth about the world, who couldn't bear the thought of monsters who wore human skin. But I knew that monsters were real. I had seen them on the news and on the internet long before I saw their true faces, and the thought of letting them add another body to their tally made me furious. I suddenly had an ambition in my miserable life, a true cause that I could devote myself to, mind, body, and soul. I would hunt the hunters. I would kill as many of those vile things as I could before they caught up with me. Maybe I could even manage to out them in the process. So, a day later, I donned an old ski mask that I had bought for a vacation that I had never taken, grabbed the gloves that came with the mask, and pocketed a switchblade that had belonged to my father. I went out that night and located one of the creatures, one which had until recently been my next-door neighbor. I saw those fleshy hollows unfurl as I walked closer, saw the flytrap of a mouth open to call to me, and I flicked the switchblade open and rammed it into his neck before he could speak. The look of shock on his inhuman face was worth all the foul-smelling dark blood that splattered my face when I tore the knife free. I fled the scene before anybody could spot me, and I returned home with a fire burning in my mind. I was elated, happy for the first time in a very long time. I had struck a blow against the things that had been stalking me. And now, I had a new purpose in life. I abandoned my house a day later, taking my clothes and anything that I could pawn with me. I drove into the city and sold all that I could. Then I bought a few new toys with the money that I had gotten. A revolver, a machete, a shotgun, and several knives of varying size. Once my weapons had been acquired, I took an old pillowcase and constructed a crude but effective mask that I used in place of the ski mask. After all, the creatures needed a face to their reaper, and a zipper-mouthed, dark-lensed, dingy gray one seemed like the perfect choice. I began my hunt. Not long after that. It was difficult at first, tracking them down and killing them as quickly as I could without attracting attention, but it got easier as time wore on. I made the papers not long after my 10th kill, when someone had managed to spot me and had taken a picture of my masked form standing over a slaughtered creature. I personally loved how the flash reflected off the lens in my mask, making my eyes look like tiny fires. They dubbed me the Back Alley Butcher, and my deeds soon became the top stories on many news stations. I saw many of the creatures who, in the guise of news anchors, read off the details of my latest exploits with terror etched into their features. They were afraid, in what had to be the first time in a very long time. I relished their fear and laughed at how baffled everyone was at my seemingly random patterns. I had lacked imagination before, but now my mind was filled with creative ways to hunt and slaughter. And that was all I needed. I stopped sleeping after the 5th week, but I didn't care. I tinkered with my mask and bought lightweight Kevlar armor after a close encounter with a creature who had a gun. And the bloodshed continued. That intense summer heat and the deaths made reporters dub the month of my reign the Summer of Blood. I love the title. It just suits me perfectly. I was at the top of my game, striking fear in whatever alien organ served as the monster's hearts. But somewhere, deep down, I knew that I would be caught eventually. But I didn't care as long as I got to whittle away at their numbers. My fall came about because of my lack of sleep. I was too high on my successes to realize that my sleepless nights were affecting my health, and I began to grow dizzy and lightheaded. I was on another hunt, stalking an infamous lawyer who got child molesters and the like off scot-free. I had him cornered, and was in the process of gutting him when a bullet tore through my shoulder. The lawyer had been tailed by one of the Thing's bodyguards who had seen me. He was too late to save his employer, but his shot had penetrated deep and had drawn blood. I was forced to flee as the bodyguard called out and brought several people running. I left a blood trail and was forced to take shelter in a storm drain in order to tend to my wounds. I knew that my hunt was at an end. They had my DNA, and that would lead them to me. I saw my face in the news not long after, and I gritted my teeth in anger at the toothy smirks of smug satisfaction that the creatures flashed when they said my name aloud. That was a few hours ago. Now I'm sitting in this diner, watching the rain fall, seeing the creatures with their flower eyes and needle teeth, gathering at the sidewalk on the other side of the street. The sounds of police sirens are getting closer. The human waitress had done her job and called the police, and I don't blame her. Poor thing can't see what I can. I look down and check my bag. My shotgun and revolver gleam in the dim light, inviting me to one final fight, another blaze of glory, and then it ends. So I take out the shotgun and load it. It'll do the most damage to the bastards. I take out my mask and put it on, savoring the smell of their polluted blood in my sweat. I place the revolver into my pocket and stand up just as the first policemen arrive. And I can see the tendrils of their faces pulling their maws into horrifying, triumphant smiles. John Mueller, 26, died Wednesday, September 4th, 2013 in his home. He was a hard-working student and beloved son. The family wishes to keep the details of his death private. He will be missed. Amen. I read that in a shitty local paper called The News Flash. I thought it was a practical joke at the time. My friend Curtis used to do pranks in grade school, so I called him up. But he swore that it wasn't him. Now, he must have been lying. No one else in town cared enough to put that much effort into a prank on me. Well, I almost forgot about the whole thing. Until November. John Mueller, 26, died Wednesday, November 12, 2013, in his home. He took his own life after swallowing a handful of sleeping pills. He worked a dead-end job to pay off dead-end debts. He spent his free time lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. His life was short and somewhat pathetic. No one will remember he existed after a month or two. Good riddance. Amen. Needless to say, I didn't laugh this time. I called my friend Curtis and told him to knock it off, but he swore that it wasn't him. I called the local paper and they didn't answer, so I left a passive-aggressive message on the voicemail. I probably went too far when I insulted their shitty graphic design. The newspaper's layout looked like it was done in Windows Paint. It was full of typos and repeated news stories every week. It was a piece of shit paper. The obituaries became a weekly thing. The paper was delivered to my front door every Saturday. I actually kind of looked forward to it at first. Call it a morbid fascination, but the details got bizarrely specific. I didn't have Facebook, so the only people who knew these things was Curtis or direct family members, so I stopped talking to Curtis, and the obituaries kept coming. But there's no way that anyone in my family would write this stuff. There were dozens of obituaries altogether, but I'll just be posting the relevant ones here. John Mueller, 26, died Wednesday, November 19th after slitting his own throat with a rusty knife. He could no longer handle the guilt of cheating on his university finals, and his student debt became too much to bear. He will not be missed. Amen. This was the first obituary which had a detail that I knew, only I knew. Although technically I didn't cheat on a university exam, it was a college exam. I wrote notes on a ball cap lid, but I never told that to anyone. Maybe the writer had just guessed it? I mean, I'm not the first person to cheat on a test. I gotta be honest though, the increasingly disturbing nature of the obituaries unsettled me. I began to sleep with the doors locked. I kept calling the local paper. No one answered. I must have left like 20 messages, and I finally decided to go there in person. I followed the address and the contact info listed in the paper. It was on Main Street. My town was an American Walmart town. You know, one of those shit highway towns that used to have a busy little Main Street until Walmart moved in. Now, Main Street was dead, and Walmart was busy. The American dream, I guess. Anyways, I drove to Main Street. It was dead silent. I almost expected a tumbleweed to drift across. Every single store was boarded up and run down. I parked in front of the newspaper building. It too was abandoned. Shitty rich kid graffiti tags were everywhere. I checked the address twice. There's that stomach drop feeling, like you got caught doing something bad. I didn't really comprehend the situation yet, but I felt sick. I asked my neighbors, and no one recognized the papers. Someone must have been writing up the entire paper and delivering it to my door every week just to fuck with me. I called the police to report a stalker, and they opened a file, but I could tell that they didn't take it very seriously. The obituaries got progressively creepier and more personal. They mentioned stories about obscure childhood events, teenage heartbreaks, jobs, etc. They often detailed myself committing suicide in some brutal manner, hanging, self-drowning, swallowing broken glass, bathing in boiling water, just to name a few. I finally decided to set up a camera and catch the fucker. They always delivered the paper to my front door. I got a shitty security camera from Walmart and set it up before work. I worked a late shift that night, and when I got home from work, a paper was on my doorstep. So I took the SD card from the camera and brought the SD card inside. I played the video. I fast-forwarded until the paper was on my doorstep. Then I rewound and played it forward. I watched in horror as the front door opened a crack and the paper slid out from my house. The front door opened and someone from inside my house dropped the paper. I grabbed the paper and flipped it to the obituary section. John Mueller, 26, died Wednesday, December 10th. He was murdered by someone who had been living in his attic for the past 7 months. That someone had been writing fake obituaries to John. John will be having a closed casket funeral due to the brutal nature of his death. Amen. There is a town in the deep south that is spoken of in whispers around campfires and by drunks in bars. No one knows its exact location, as those who have been there can't agree on where they were when they arrived. Its location has been speculated to be in dozens of different counties throughout Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. The only thing any of the visitors can agree on is that each of them were lost when they drove past the aged wooden sign proclaiming, "Welcome to Sandalwood." To the best of anyone's knowledge, no one has ever found Sandalwood on purpose. Public record. Many attempts over the years have been made to find or research Sandalwood. None of the 3 states mentioned have any records of it ever paying taxes, or just existing in general. The federal government has no documents pertaining to it. Now that being said, there is still some notary evidence that there was a place called Sandalwood. A young librarian found a private journal in a library in New Orleans in which the writer, a Mr. Jean-Claude Bellevue, mentioned Sandalwood in an entry. July 9th, 1951. My recent trip to Sandalwood has yielded a great bounty for me. The items I acquired in the tunnels have sold for a very handsome profit on the voodoo market. There's no way to tell what those items might have been, and none of Sandalwood's visitors to date have reported anything about tunnels. A letter was found in the old desk of one of Alabama's governors in which the writer makes a list of demands, including a mention of Sandalwood. And furthermore, sir, the people I represent wish you to address the problem of the town of Sandalwood refusing to clear out some of the swamplands surrounding it. They are chock full of alligators and venomous snakes, and pose a threat to the health of surrounding communities. Though it is unknown where in Alabama this letter came from. The lost visitors. Everyone who visits Sandalwood and tells about it was lost when they happened upon it. Or at least, so they claim. Mostly it's couples or college students, or just lone thrill-seekers wanting to explore the unique culture of the South without actually taking time to research where this culture might be found. Very few natives of the 3 states where Sandalwood can supposedly be found have ever been there, though many of them seem to know something about it. All the visitors report that Sandalwood is a ghost town, completely devoid of life. They describe the town's layout thusly. To the north and east there is nothing but swampland. There is a road running out of the swamp to the east that leads through Sandalwood, and this is the road most people arrive by. There is also a road to the north, but it appears to be mostly submerged in bogs. The center of town is a smattering of several hundred houses, barns, and public buildings, all abandoned. A road that branches off from the main streets leads south to a large hill that a sign identifies as Cemetery Hill. The hill is covered with hundreds if not thousands of graves, which are positioned on multiple terraces cut into the hill. Those brave enough to explore claim that each terrace is dotted with human bones. Some of the graves appear to be partially dug up. Several of the visitors have claimed to hear shuffling and scratching from beneath the ground, as though something large was moving underneath them. Beyond Cemetery Hill is a remarkably complex series of buildings and facilities that appear to have served as a campus. A sign at the entrance identifies the area as Sandalwood University. There appear to be no students, but the visitors report that the campus is very modern, even having computers and vending machines, and appears to be well kept and clean. It goes without saying, of course, that no record of any such institution exists. The main road continues west and leads out of Sandalwood, though there appears to be nothing along this road except abandoned farmland and empty fields. Of the several hundred known visitors of Sandalwood, 17 have disappeared. One man lost his wife, claiming that he was exploring Cemetery Hill while she remained with the car. When he came back, it was empty. A group of 6 college students lost one of their friends while camping out in a barn in Sandalwood to escape a large storm. though strangely, it cannot be determined which storm this was. They slept together, but woke up to their friend missing. A detail that was left out of the police report, but circulated through word of mouth, was that the friends had seen strange shapes moving through the rain, but that it was too dark to make them out completely. Some appeared humanoid, and others did not. Local incidents. The residents of the 3 states have their own fair share of Sandalwood stories as well. A runaway child case involved a troubled teenager telling her parents that she was going to live in Sandalwood. She was never seen again. A man committed to a psychiatric hospital in Louisiana claimed that he once lived in Sandalwood. He was able to describe the physical details of the town perfectly, but most assumed that he heard them through stories of their visitors. He committed suicide via ingested glass several weeks after his committal. A farmer's dog ran away for 2 weeks and returned with a postcard in his mouth that showed a picture of a woman holding apple pie next to the "Welcome to Sandalwood" sign and smiling. Similarly, a postmaster in Mississippi took a picture of a stamp that he found on a letter with no return address that has a picture of the Sandalwood sign on it, though he refused to reveal who the letter was addressed to. A young man in his freshman year at Mississippi State University saved a screenshot of an email that he received from Sandalwood University, offering him a full scholarship to attend. Sandalwood remains very mysterious, but recently has been gaining national attention after a prominent congressman's son disappeared while on a trip to Alabama. His last correspondence to his father was a text message that read, "I'm lost, stopping in Sandalwood for directions." Attempts to triangulate his cell phone revealed it to be in a fish market in Africa. Sandalwood was also the subject of a series of online short stories published on various websites dealing in creepypasta, a type of online horror story. Most of them are instructions on what to do in Sandalwood for supernatural gain, ritual pastas, but some are stories dealing with cursed items from the town, artifact pastas, and the lost visitors. The author has not been tracked down, but is wanted for questioning, as one of his stories deals with the graphic murder of a child by an unknown assailant. The child in question is missing from his home state of Ohio, and the author revealed details about him in his story that he couldn't possibly have known. With all the newfound attention, hundreds of people across the country have pledged to find Sandalwood and reveal its secrets to the world. The states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama have seen big tourist boosts in recent months. Thus far, no disappearances have been reported. Yet.